You can train hard and eat clean, but if you're sleeping like crap, your body will work against you. Now, this is not rocket science, my friend. This is not nothing you don't know, but it's actually a lot more complex than what you think with sleep. It's not just I hit the pillow, I sleep, great, fantastic. No, there's actually a lot more to it. Metabolic health. So there's 5 pillars, and this is pillar 1, because I believe it's the most important one. I'm going to break down the other 4 in the next 4 episodes of this metabolic health series. So the other 4 pillars, by the way, is stress, size, nutrition, and gut, which I'll touch on going forward. So anyway, why does sleep matter for metabolism? Now, one night's poor sleep, even one night's poor sleep, right? We're talking, under, say, 6 hours. Leptin's a hormone. It's called the satiety hormone. It tells you you're full. Ghrelin is a hormone which is called the hunger hormone. It tells you when to eat, essentially, right? So more ghrelin equals more cravings. Let's just put it simply like that. Not to mention cortisol, right? Which is being given a bad, by the way, I like to say with cortisol, when I always talk about cortisol, it's like I always talk about in a bad light. It's actually an essential hormone, of course, one of the most important ones for survival. It has a lot of benefits when it comes to survival, when it comes to getting stuff done, when it comes to lots of different things. But when it comes to elevated levels of cortisol, or prolonged elevated levels of cortisol, that's a problem. So cortisol obviously is going to be through the roof. Most of your stress hormones are going to be through the roof after even one night's poor sleep, let alone like the majority, actually a huge chunk of people, I can't remember what the percentage is, it's a ridiculous amount of people, it's getting worse and worse, the sleep deprivation epidemic. It's literally an epidemic. And that's only the people that report it. From what I see is people think they sleep great, but they don't. Anyway, then we go to cortisol, and that's obviously fat storage, right? Look at cortisol. If you have too much, there's a big study done on this, by the way, on women, and even lean women. They found when they had worse sleep, the cortisol levels were way more elevated. And the ones that had more elevated cortisol actually had way more fat storage around the belly, visceral fat around the organs. Now, there's 4 times higher amounts of cortisol receptors around that area, right, around the belly. So that probably explains why. But people struggle as it is to lose visceral fat, so you don't want to be adding to that by getting poor sleep. Not to mention insulin sensitivity, right? So they did a study that found 1 week of poor sleep dropped insulin sensitivity by 20 to 30%. That's insane, ladies and gents. To give you an example, right? When you're insulin, so you got insulin sensitivity, that's a good thing. We'll say that's a good thing, right? For example, lifting weights, getting stronger, eating well, being leaner. Those things generally are going to increase insulin sensitivity. Having more muscle on your body, it's going to make your body more sensitive to insulin, which is generally a good thing. Insulin resistance, on the other side, that's when you're going towards, if you stay there for too long, that's when you're going towards pre-diabetic range. And then after being pre-diabetic for around about 3 years on average, that's when it turns into full-blown type 2 diabetes. It's not a small thing. And when it comes to 1 week of poor sleep, people are living their lives like that. They're getting suboptimal sleep. People, the problem is people then adapt to it. And just because we adapt to it and we survive, that doesn't mean you're thriving. Your body will get used to it. Like I'm looking to have kids, right, next year. And if all goes to plan, our first kid will be next year, the end of next year, right? If our schedule goes to plan. I know life doesn't work like that, but I'm already prepared for that. And I already know, look, I'm not prepared for it. I know it's going to be horrendous, but I already know I'll adapt. It'll be absolutely horrific, but I'll adapt because I'll have no choice. But adapting and surviving with having suboptimal sleep is very different to thriving. And the only way you know that is by fine-tuning it, which is what I'll get to. Now, this is something you need to be really important, really paying attention to. Fat versus muscle loss. What they found is sleep-deprived dieters, so they did a study and they found, I think it was last year, Stan Efferdin, who I had on the show, talked about, right? They had a group that had 5.5 hours sleep, another group that had 8.5 hours sleep, right? Which is optimal, to say the least. What they found was they had the 2 groups doing a weight loss program. I think it might have been, I can't remember how long it was now. It was over a decent period. And they both lost the same amount of weight, which was interesting. But what they found is that the group that was sleep deprived, they actually lost like 55% more muscle. 55% of the weight they lost was muscle, whereas the other group didn't lose any muscle. That's crazy, just from having poor sleep. So the body's paring down muscle, and that kind of makes sense, evolutionary as well, because muscle tissue is very expensive. It's going to cost your body calories. It's going to cost your body energy. The way your body looks at it is this could potentially have a negative impact on our ability to survive, having this muscle on our body. Pare it down, don't need it. That's crazy. When you look at people who lose weight, if they're sleep deprived, okay, great, you're losing weight. This is why I get annoyed by that one metric. When people only pay attention to one metric, you're setting yourself up to fail because there's lots of different variables. When you look at body composition, visceral fat, bone density, that's why I like measuring these things with clients. Not all weight lost is the same. So growth hormone as well, not to mention growth hormone, right? This is released during deep sleep. I think it's generally within the first 90 minutes, I think, the highest, if I've got that right. Definitely the first time, it'll be the first 90 minutes because that's when you have your deep sleep. And that's when growth hormone is released, secreted at its highest amount. And growth hormone is a fat-burning hormone. And not to mention growth hormone, you hear people taking growth hormone, right? It regenerates every single cell in your body. It's a pretty important hormone, right? So if you're looking to get leaner, you don't want that to be low. Definitely not. And if you're not going to bed early enough, for example, with deep sleep, that happens generally the first part of sleep. If you go to bed late, generally you're going to compromise more deep sleep if you're not going to bed on time, which is a big problem. That's the restorative sleep, right? So look, let's move on to number 3. That's kind of why it matters in a nutshell. Now, I could be here all day if I was talking about all the other moving parts, but just in relation to metabolic health, metabolism, and obviously body composition as well, they're kind of the big rocks, right, which I covered there. And let's look at cortisol in terms of, I want to go deeper into cortisol, stress, and fat gain. Now, I did just touch on that study there. Now, when you look at chronic stress, right, so we're living in a day and age now where we've got continuous stress. We've never really dealt with this before, where we've got our phone, right? That's a constant stress. People don't realize. Pick the phone up to your face, cortisol level is going to be higher, more stress. Put it away, generally it's going to be less cortisol, right? It's kind of that simple, really, when it comes to the impact on stress hormones. So that's an example, right? We've got this steady kind of continuous amount of stress, moderate stress, that we are trying to adapt to as humans nowadays in the modern era with technology. People are working longer hours than ever because they've got access to emails on their phone, right? And also that then obviously chronic stress, sorry, I can't get my words out today. Bloody hell, slow down. I'm about to eat my meal, ladies and gents, right? It's a Saturday evening here and I'm hungry, so I'm going to slow this down a bit, right? Anyway, speaking of stress and food, really what happens then is back in the day, think about, right? We've got this built-in evolutionary old brain, right, which is millions of years old. And we would have had fight or flight. We would have, a tiger's come in. We got this high amount of, insane amount of stress, burst of those stress hormones, right? Adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, run from the tiger, survive, live. Okay, it's gone. So we probably would have been, I would imagine, adapting to these bursts of stress and then going back to, okay, now we got to hibernate in the cave. Whereas now it's like this continuous stress nonstop. And what happens with chronic stress, and when it's continuous chronic stress, and by the way, chronic stress is gaining weight. When you're gaining weight, gaining body fat, carrying excess fat on your body, especially visceral fat, that will lead to chronic stress later down the line, right? And the fat distribution then is going to go to the abdomen. And again, when we have the high cortisol, that is going to translate to more fat around the midsection and more cravings for comfort foods, right? So when we have sleep deprivation, our metabolism actually slows down. Right? What they found is stressed women, when they had elevated cortisol level for prolonged periods, their body, not even prolonged periods, it was a short period of time from sleep deprivation, their body burned 100 less calories a day after a high-fat meal, right? So when they were eating their usual meals, they were having high-fat meals and protein or whatever, their body was burning 100 fewer less calories, right? And not to mention, we eat 30 or 40% more, or 300 to 500 more calories when we're sleep deprived, right? And I'm going to get into an example that I experienced this week as well. But also, when we talk about stress, metabolic health, metabolism, the impacts, and fat gain and fat storage, we've got to look at exercise as well. This is one that's overlooked. Exercise will make a massive difference on your quality of sleep. And I've noticed this lately. So I've been actually only doing 2 full body workouts in the gym lately and just bands on the days in between. I've scaled it right back so I can get more work done. And it's paying off. I'm actually getting more work done. Surprise, surprise. So I'm spending less time in the gym. Not necessarily recommending people should work more and train less. In fact, most people need to do the other. But in my case, I needed to scale it back. And I'm doing band sessions, right, that I always talk about on the days in between, which are low intensity. So what I'm noticing is my sleep and my recovery on the Oura Ring is improving. Definitely my recovery, my HRV, which is your heart rate variability. Essentially, the higher that is, the better your body's adapting to stress. And my HRV is continuously higher because I'm training at a less, so I'm recovering better from training. Now, most people get stuck in that recovery trap. And for example, a lot of people do high intensity cardio and CrossFit and running and stuff, really intense stuff. And look, I'm not talking down on exercise, do what exercise works for you, but most people are stuck in that recovery trap and they wonder why their sleep's not as good. But then because they're addicted to a feeling, right? And I call it cortisol junkies. There's a name for it. I used to be in that category. Cortisol junkies, people who go and do high intensity stuff, F45, and I'm not shooting these things down, by the way, right? I'm all for whatever exercise you're going to do, but using some examples like F45, CrossFit, sprinting, you're chasing adrenaline, you're chasing cortisol. This happens I feel great when I do it, people say to me. I have new clients, I love it because I feel amazing. And it's like, yeah, we need to like drop those stress levels. I can sense how heightened, how your body is in that fight or flight state most of the time. And do you know what that's doing? That's actually slowing down recovery. It's actually storing fat and it's impacting it. So let's change that and train smarter, which is why, for example, strength training, you can overdo that as well. Lift the weights, by the way, very easy. So it's not like I always talk about strength training being the best one. You can do this with any training, but it's actually much easier to do to cross a line when you're doing the high intensity stuff and you're doing cardio, excessive cardio, those kind of things, right? So that'll massively impact sleep, recovery, hormones, decision-making with food, and ultimately fat gain, right? So it's all interlinked. So that kind of ties up, cortisol, stress, fat gain, training, those kind of things. Metabolic assessment. Now, I keep offering you guys in my audience this, right? And lots of you have taken me up on this, and you've said it's been a game changer. So I want to offer it again. Now, with this assessment, essentially, this is a process that I just use for clients, right? Long story short, and it tells you the best path to take based on your metabolic score, which takes all of these pillars into account. It'll tell you exactly what to do, the plan to do for your specific body type as well. Because following some random person's workouts on the internet is not going to be right for your body. And you can get it all online, but what works for your body is very, very unique. So look, if you want to get a free assessment, you want the plan, you want a metabolic score, I'm going to give you one of these for free. Click the link in the show notes. So number 4, I want to touch on another point, right? So let's talk about the obesity and fat gain link when it comes to sleep. So, and I see this, look, and when I look at like people that I coach and stuff, right, and that I take on, not that I don't take on not that I'm against taking on obese people, just generally the people that reach out to me, they're, whatever, they're different shapes and sizes, but they're not really obese necessarily. But what I do notice is people that have been struggling for a long time or stuck in a plateau or not building muscle even, or spinning their wheels for years, even yo-yo dieting, the sleep's suboptimal most of the time. That foundation is not there, right? And they're not prioritizing coming away from the phone. They're not prioritizing sleep hygiene as much as they should. And they just overlooked it because people always, it's interesting to me how a lot of people, they're so kind of like, and you might relate to this, they're so urgent about getting in shape and about, looking better, feeling better and being healthier, which I get. But you've been living a certain way for a long time, right? It takes a decent amount of time then to turn things round. So it's a marathon, not a sprint with this stuff. So you can't just sweep sleep to the side and go, yeah, I'll get to that. I'm sleeping decent. Oh, I'll get away with the 6 hours. You won't. And you're going to get suboptimal results. You're going to burn out and you're going to die younger, right? I'm just going to say it how it is. So they did a study, right? They found 70,000, a study on 70,000 women. And they found that they had way, I can't remember how much more weight gain it was now. It was a significant amount of weight gain from having less than 5 hours sleep versus 7 to 8 hours, right? Just from that one factor, sleep. So like I said, 300 to 500 calories more per day or 44% more a day when sleep deprived people eat. And, poor sleep makes us just crave more, right? More junk food, more rewarding food. They did brain scans on this as well, right? So this is factual. And I want to give you an example, a stupid mistake that I made this week, ladies and gents, right? I had an old client reached out. He really needed my help. He wanted to get back on board, right? So the only time he could do, because of the time difference, was 5:30 a.m. Now, I wake up at around about 6:30 a.m. So I had to set my alarm, right, for like 5:10 a.m. And it wasn't just that. It was the fact that because I knew I was getting up earlier, when you're like thinking about it, and then I was tossed, oh my God, it was a terrible decision, ladies and gents. I had 4 hours and 50 minutes sleep, right? So normally I'll get, 7 hours, 7.5. Horrendous. Got up, jumped on a call with him. The day was ruined, right? So not only, I could not believe the cravings. I went and bought, right, a 2-liter bottle of milk. I don't drink milk. I like milk, but I don't drink it because it messes my gut up. And I was like, forget about it. I'll buy 2 liters of milk. I got a coffee machine. I never have lattes either. I said, I get my girlfriend to make me like lattes and stuff, right? Which doesn't sound, then I got a bar of dark chocolate and I bought this one, which I wouldn't normally buy. It was more artificial. And I smashed like 80 grams of that, right? And I'm just like, and then not only that, My missus told me something in the night. She asked me, and I forgot about it because my memory was all over the place, right? Just from that one night's poor sleep. And then I had not an argument with her. Then she was pissed off. Then the next day she was pissed off. And I'm like, Jesus, all this for one night's poor sleep, terrible sleep, under 5 hours, right? So that's me. I was fully aware of that. You can't get away from that, right? So if you're not optimizing sleep, you're going to be eating more. And then obviously when it comes to metabolic health, metabolism, the impact on that, your metabolism is going to slow down and burn less. So your basal metabolic rate is actually going to slow down and burn less calories, right? So the BMR, the basal metabolic rate, is just what your body burns to keep the lights on, right? To keep your organs functioning, particularly your brain, which uses up a lot of energy, and all the rest of it, right? So that's going to slow down to adapt to the insane amount of stress that your body goes through when you deprive it of sleep. Think about all the it's so fascinating and complex, sleep, and what the body does when you're sleeping. It's insane. It literally regenerates your brain. It literally repairs it when you're sleeping, right? In the deep sleep part, I believe, and REM sleep as well. Of course, REM is like therapy for the brain, essentially, right? REM sleep is when you go into that paralysis, it's sleep paralysis. So when you're dreaming and you're in that REM state, your body's paralyzed, which is crazy, right? Literally. Yeah, and then obviously it's just harder to eat whole foods, right? You find that people they want the quick, fast energy, fast sugar, and ultimately that's from lack of sleep, right? You want a quick fix. So look, I want to get into now like practical points that I get my clients to implement and what I actually implement myself when it comes to optimizing sleep. Now, for me, as I've said before, I've got the Oura ring, right, which I wear, and I've also got 8 Sleep, and the 8 Sleep, it's expensive, but it's one of the best investments I've made, and it gets the bed at the right temperature. So the most important thing is the temperature of your room when it comes to sleep. And even if you're not aware of it, or if you're someone that's aware that you toss and turn, that's one thing, but most of the time you're not even aware of it. Even if your room temperature is up by like 1 degree, it's going to have a negative impact on sleep. So the great thing with the 8 Sleep that I use is this AI technology, and it regulates the temperature of the mattress. So it changed. So like last night, for example, I made like 30 adjustments. So for me, the perfect temperature is like -2 to -3. So it cools the mattress to -2 to -3, and it fluctuates based on my body's temperature, right? It's crazy technology. So that's an extreme example, right? And you don't necessarily have to get 8 Sleep, right? Because it's really expensive, to be honest. Just make sure your room's the right temperature, basically. So that's really, really important. And a dark room as well. Obviously, eye mask, having the room dark. And regularity is key, right? So the thing is, people overlook this. And you've got to really put the work in with sleep. And you've got to put that. The hardest thing is getting away from that addiction, right? And that addiction is the phone, the screen. Right? Your phone, just get it away. I keep mine out of the room, and I recommend this to clients. Get yourself a cheap alarm clock, put it in the room, get the phone out of the room. That's your best bet, right? Don't have it there. And the worst thing you can do when you wake up in the nighttime, like most people, and look at your phone, if you're doing that, horrendous for your circadian rhythm. Essentially, it sets up what they've now called a disappointment circuit in your brain, right? When you look at your phone in the nighttime. Get it out of the room and get an alarm clock, you tight ass, right? The alarm clock is like, what, $10? So that's a simple one, right? But regularity, going to bed at the same time, right? Now, even 15 minutes. This is the thing. On the weekends, people just kind of like, you got to have a life, I get it, and be social, but you got to keep it relatively dialed even on the weekends, right? So if you're taking the piss and you're having more than half hour to an hour later than usual bedtime, if you go past an hour, it's even worse. You start your week in second gear. You've got social jet lag. It's called social jet lag. You've got that to deal with them, right? So going to bed at the same time, naturally you start waking up at the same time then as well. And yeah, the screens, like I mentioned, the big one is avoiding that screen, going back to cortisol. You've got to drop those stress hormones in the evening, and you want to increase melatonin. Melatonin is the sleep-induced hormone. It's also an antioxidant that fights cancer, for example. And that is going to be lower when cortisol's higher, when you're staring at that screen. So having a wind down routine, like I'm always thinking ahead. My whole day, it sounds crazy, right? My whole day, even now, right? You can hear me, fumbling my words and stuff because I've got to eat. I don't want to leave it too late to eat. It's almost 5:30 p.m. here, right? I don't like to eat later than 5:30 p.m., right? I'm doing this for you guys, right? So I like to eat, especially before it gets dark. It's wintertime here now, right? And that makes a difference as well, by the way, the circadian rhythm. If you eat when it's dark, it's not as good for the body, and it can have a negative impact on sleep. So give it at least 3-4 hours before bed. Cut your food off, ideally. And That's one of the most important things, basically. And then the wind down routine. So the reason I was saying that is because I'm planning ahead so I can firstly finish eating early. Then I put my blue light blockers on, the nighttime glasses that I put on about 3 hours before sleep, so about 7 p.m. ish. And even when I go for my evening walk, then I walk around the shopping center here just across the road, right? Because it's colder now. All the lights are bright in there. I've got my orange blue light blocker glasses on, right? I look like a bit of a weirdo, but who cares, right? And I've got that ritual. And then I get home and then I make sure I dim the lights down. So I just put the lamp on, or red salt lamps, even better, about 2 hours before bedtime. So I'm sending that signal that it's, it's getting close to bedtime. You got to prepare your body and brain for that, right? And then, I'd say at least an hour, no phone and laptop, a minimum of an hour. I try and do like 90 minutes, but a minimum of an hour. You can say if you're doing none and you're on your phone right till you go to sleep, even 30 minutes will help. But you definitely want to get to an hour. And yeah, the 3-2-1 method, keep it simple, right? So 3 hours, no food, 2 hours, no water, but make sure you've drank enough water and you've hydrated, because nothing's worse for sleep than not having enough water. But give it 2 hours before bed to cut the water off, ideally for most people. And then 1 hour, no electronics, no blue light, the 3-2-1 method, very simple. But look, don't overlook this. If you're not where you want to be with your body and you want to lose fat, you want to improve your metabolic health, you want to live longer, forget about everything else and hammer home one or two things that I've mentioned here in terms of habits for sleep. Nighttime routine. In the nighttime, that's going to determine your next day's success. Is the next day going to be a success? Is it going to be productive? Are you going to eat better? It's all determined by that nighttime routine. So I read for that hour before bedtime. Sometimes I'll watch TV. Like, I'm going to treat myself now because my girlfriend's away, so I'll watch some TV, right? Probably until half hour before bedtime. I never normally do that. But that, I even looked at my aura and my stress levels were low. I was in a relaxed state doing that. So, but it's still blue light. It's not as bad as the phone and laptop, but most of the time, like 90% of the time, 95%, I'm reading my book. I haven't got any good books right now. Just finished them. But I read my book in bed. We've got the salt lamp here, the red salt lamp, which it's not blue light, right? So it's fine for sleep. And I have that in place, breathing, journaling, those kind of things. Have that routine in place. Even if you're getting your gym stuff ready for the next day, brushing your teeth, anything you're doing to prepare for sleep and is not involving the blue light, right? So yeah, it's key that you nail those things, ladies and gents, right? So look, I'm just going to recap this with, obviously sleep is going to make a massive impact on hormones, hunger hormones, satiety hormones, stress hormones, sex hormones. I haven't even talked about testosterone and estrogen and how that gets impacted, right? I didn't even go there, but that's another conversation. But everything's going to get impacted, right? It's make or break with you getting optimal sleep. And if you're grinding but not seeing results, right, you got to check your sleep before you start blaming your diet or training. Check that first. But look, if you want my help, now's a good time, ladies and gents, right? Because I'm just taking on right now a handful of people who want to work closely with me one-to-one. So I don't work with everyone. I only work with a certain type of client. So you'd have to qualify first for the program. It's not just as simple as like, yeah, okay, great. I work with everyone. I don't. I like to make sure that I get amazing results with everyone I work with. Now's your chance. So I've left the form in the show notes, the one-to-one form. Quickly fill that out, and then I'll be in touch, and we can have a chat. Either way, I'm happy to help, right? So if it doesn't turn out that you're a good fit for the program, I'm happy to help and point you in the right direction. So if you're ready to dial in your metabolism and supercharge your metabolism, turn your body into a fat-burning machine, implement habits that you can actually stick to so you can create lasting change, get leaner, stronger, healthier, just simply click the link in the show notes, or you can just drop me a DM on Instagram, right? If you're on Instagram, it's even better to do that way because we can fast track it. Then just DM me on Instagram with the word results, or just DM me and say, hey, heard your podcast. What's it about? And then we'll get to it, right? But the link is in the show notes. And the link's also in the show notes for the metabolic assessment, right? So, all right, ladies and gents, I'm going to leave that there and check out this next video as well. If you're on YouTube, check out this next video, which is linked to everything we just talked about there: sleep, metabolism, health, and getting in shape. So over and out. Speak soon.